moderator, and we would like for you to meet on our show today Lance Fisher, former Deputy Chief of the Palm Bay Police Department. Welcome, Lance.
Thank you, sir.
Lance was within a few years of taking the reins over the Chief of Police of the Palm Bay Police Department, and he had been with the department since 2004. And he missed a couple of years, and we'll see that. But a conversation with Palm Bay Chief Mario Agulo in April of 2024 changed everything for Fisher and his career. Instead of making plans to lead the Palm Bay force, Fisher is now on the outs with the department that he once revered. We would like for you to meet him and tell his story as he greets us here with brevardNEWS. And so, Lance, what is your current status with Palm Bay?
Yeah, I've been separated from the police department since September the 2nd. That's it.
September the 2nd of
2024.
And so over a year. So can you tell us what happened?
Yeah, so I've been pretty open about my story. I was struggling with some mental wellness issues towards the end. I met with the Chief of Jello on April 15th and discussed those with him, which he was well aware because we had multiple discussions of that. And quite honestly, when the conversation had ended, he basically told me, I don't need to use my deputy chief. If you can't be a part of my succession plan, then I don't need you here any longer. 2 days later, he confronts me in my office, starts berating me, tapping his temple, saying, you're not right in the head and you can't do this job anymore, and basically throws me out of the building. So that's pretty much it.
Is this commonplace for a police officer who is going through this kind of situation to have that kind of response?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So I did do a little research here and just pulled up some numbers on the depth of the crisis of the mental health issue with police. And this is from around the country, and this is from Police One, and they did a survey. And this is what they found, that the stress of police work manifests in various high-impact ways, with officers reporting the following consequences, and tell me if you're familiar with this, specifically resulting from their work-related stress. 71% struggled with sleep disturbances.
Yes, sir.
Would that be correct?
Absolutely.
50% experience heightened anger.
Yes, sir.
Is that common?
Yes, sir.
50% indicated relationship of family issues such as arguments, tensions, and conflicts.
Yes, sir.
39% were affected by depression.
Yes, sir.
So you're checking off all the boxes.
Checking the boxes.
36% endured anxiety or panic attacks.
Yep.
Now, you actually were hospitalized a couple of months before, right?
Yes, sir.
With a panic attack.
Absolutely.
35% reported post-traumatic stress, PTSD.
Yes, sir.
So an alarming 11% harbored suicidal thoughts specifically due to work stress.
I've been fortunate and I have not had those.
Okay, but you have known people who have
absolutely.
had that?
Yes, sir.
Is that common?
I think it's probably more common than the 11% because, again, in our field, a lot of times you don't talk about what's going on the inside.
So some of the things that they said here, and I just want to go down these real quick because I thought it was interesting that they said were stressors that caused some of the problems were long or irregular work hours. Would that be correct?
Yes, sir.
Understaffing and unbalanced work-life demands,
Yes.
exposure to traumatic events.
Daily.
And the main thing that I saw here that they said 50% of the people said poor quality of leadership.
Yeah, that's what happened to me. That's exactly what happened to me.
So with that, you go in and you talk to the chief and you tell him that you're having some issues. And they basically encourage officers to come in to do this, right?
Yes, sir. That was our program. Our program was, we had open conversations about it. Chief had open conversations about his struggles. We had officers that had open conversations about their struggles. I was open about it. I was open about it months prior with the chief. As a deputy chief, you can't talk to everybody in the agency, but that's the guy you talk to. That's the relationship him and I had as a chief and a deputy chief. So he's the one that I confided in.
So you felt like that this was normal, that the chief talks about it. Everyone talks to each other about issues that they're struggling with.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you go in. You had before then had some struggles. You had an accident that you had to contend with on 95. Tell us about that.
Well, this was years ago. It was like 12 years ago. But this is one that I remember like it was yesterday. I go out to 95, and it was a vehicle that slammed in the back of a semi truck, and unfortunately, a mother and a 3-year-old were killed. And, I looked at the 3-year-old in the back seat of the vehicle, and she just had a little tiny drop of blood coming from her nose, no other injuries. But at the time I had a 3-year-old, and that was the first time in my law enforcement career that I went home and broke down at the end of my bed, just crying, sobbing.
Now, I talked to some Brevard County firefighters, and they said one of the hardest things for firefighters is to deal with the death or the injuries of young kids.
Yes, sir.
So
Absolutely.
why is that?
I think, one, they're innocent, right? I mean, when you see an infant or a child, they're innocent. They haven't filled their life. They haven't enjoyed their life like adults do and stuff like that. And then a lot of us that are in law enforcement have children, so it touches a different side of us. And it's heartbreaking.
You had an issue with the fact that former Chief Jimmy Rogers committed suicide.
Yes, sir. One of our police chiefs. Yep. After he retired, he struggled with mental illness, and a lot of his was due to the loss of identity, loss of job. You spend a career in law enforcement where you're surrounded by what you're called family, and then all of a sudden one day you're no longer in that field. Yeah, it was a struggle for him, and unfortunately he did take his life.
So he took his life. You were called to the scene.
Yes, sir.
So you saw your former boss in this condition.
Yes, sir.
How did that affect you?
It was brutal. I remember Chief Rogers he was a mentor of mine. He was a physically fit guy. I mean, he took care of himself. He was always working out. And then, I see him years later, full beard, just a shell of the man that he was. And I could see the toll that had been taken on him. And, my fear at the time was, if I'm struggling, I mean, this Chief Rogers had a great family background, great spiritual background. I believed a better background than I had. And I'm like, if this took his life, man, I got to make some changes.
So how does it? I mean, so when you went to the hospital in February before you went to talk to the chief, what was it that precipitated that?
It was well, I'd had one other panic attack, which I didn't know what they were. I was in a conference in San Diego. We were in a large crowd, and all of a sudden everything just started becoming a blur, and I had to fight my way out of the crowd and ended up getting back to my hotel room. So I had no idea what it was. And then in February, I'm sitting at home, and all of a sudden my chest just starts feel like it's just going to cave in. I can't breathe. I have no idea what's going on. My blood pressure shoots, I think it was 200 over 140 or something like that. And I honestly thought I was having a heart attack. I thought I was dead. I thought I was dying. It just hit me all of a sudden.
So what do you say to people who just say, like, hey, just shake it off and keep going? I mean, is it the continued exposure to traumas that continue to perpetuate it, or is it some of these things you can't shake off?
Well, I shook it off for many years. I think when you're in that field, you're taught to compartmentalize. Just put it back and just move on to the next call. And sometimes you don't have time to even think about the call. You may go from one tragic call to the next tragic call. So you don't even have time to process. And what I've learned, and I was one of those guys early on, just shake it off, move on. It's part of the job. But it ended up taking a toll on me. For me, it was when I took an administrative role. I was no longer doing the call to call and going from adrenaline to low adrenaline to high adrenaline. It was when I was sitting in an office.
Do you think that's better in some ways, being out in the field?
It would have been for me, but there would have been a point in time it's going to catch up to. It would have caught up to me, because even at retirement, I wouldn't have been doing that same job. So I think it taxed everybody differently. People handle stress and handle it differently. I was diagnosed in the Marine Corps. Probably the best thing for a military person to do is not to go into law enforcement. But they don't tell you that, right?
Why is it not a good thing to go into law enforcement?
Because all I did was compile tragedy on top of tragedy, right? The tragic events and what I saw in the Marine Corps, and I just piled it on top of it, went straight into law enforcement with no break. But again, I was a young kid and it wasn't bothering me. It didn't bother me until a couple of years ago.
So, I mean, are you in a situation like that where you have to shut it off, but if you shut it off, then you become cold toward the people that you're serving?
Yeah, that's the unfortunate side, right? It takes a toll, and you'll see videos and you'll see things that go on, and a lot of times it's because the officer is suffering. That's why he is cold to the public. That's why he is short-tempered. You don't know what call he just came from. You don't know what call he's trying to clear this one to get to. You don't know what calls was he on last night. And that's the unfortunate side is is we're human. That's just the nature of the beast. And so it's a struggle sometimes to go from call to call, or to go from a tragic incident into the next call that may be very minuscule. It could be just a vehicle burglary, but you're still dealing with the last call because you didn't get a chance to pull aside and decompress for 30 minutes or even get a chance to discuss it. And that's the trouble. And officers, like I said, they're human. They're full of emotions too.
Does this excuse the behavior of the officers? And
Absolutely.
how do you reconcile those?
Absolutely not. We have to understand that, and we were trying to do that in Palm Bay. We were trying to make sure that our supervisors knew if we had officers that were on a baby death call or a tragic crash where it was just trauma, we were telling them it's okay. Give your officers a little break, a timeout. Have them go sit aside. If they need to talk to somebody, talk to somebody. But try not to let them go from call to call, because we can't excuse our actions. You just can't excuse them. You can say this is why it happened, but it's still not an excuse, because the person you're talking to, that you're being rude to, or that you use force on, doesn't care about the last call you're on. They just don't. They care about their call, because their call is the most important. And it should be, because people call the police because their call is the most important one.
So are you dependent upon other officers to watch your back and to see when you're maybe crossing the line, or you need to maybe take a step back?
Yes, that's what we were trying to focus on, trying to get our supervisors into training, have them recognize. One of the things that we did through our mental wellness program is we put an app on the cell phone, which gave them all kinds of resources that they could use. Because if there weren't times that they could stop and sit down and talk to somebody, at least they could do the resources. But we relied on our supervisors and the officers. So we were doing a lot of training so that we could recognize some of the signs from call to call. And if we had to take somebody out of the game for a little bit, there was no problem with that.
So you go into the office and you talk to the chief, and this is April 17th, 2024, correct?
I went to his office on April 15th.
Or April the 15th.
Yes, sir.
So you go to talk to him. You told him what?
I basically said, hey, listen, I'm struggling. I've been struggling mentally. My leadership isn't the same as it's been. I've been sitting behind closed doors. I've been angry, and I wasn't comfortable with the way I was dealing with things. And we had a conversation, and I said, I'm struggling. I don't know how long I'm going to be able to do this job. I just don't know, because I was unsure. I had a goal. My goal was to do another 3.5 more years. That was my goal. But honestly, I wasn't sure if I was going to meet that goal.
But the chief was expecting maybe that you would replace him?
Because
you were the next in line, right?
That was the plan that we had. His succession plan was that he would, once he retired, then I would take over as his chief.
Did you want to do that?
There was a time that I did want to do that, absolutely. But towards the end, it wasn't my goal. I was already telling him, I'm not going to be your successor. And to the point where he was saying, well, stop telling people that, because they're going to start believing you. But I already knew that my time was coming. In 3 years, I would have been at my retirement age. I wouldn't have to take the penalties, and I was okay with that, because I've been doing public service since 1994. That's when I joined the United States Marine Corps. My time had come and gone, and I knew it was affecting me and my family, and so I was good with that. I was good with ending my career as a deputy chief. I was fine with that.
So what did you expect when you went in to talk to him? What did you think the outcome was going to be?
I expected what every other officer gets. Hey, let's go, let's get you some treatment, let's get you some help. Let's, we'll do whatever, make accommodations, whatever it is. If you got to take some days off, take some days off. It was some kind of a support system that we've done for many officers. That's what I was expecting. I certainly wasn't expecting, I don't need you as deputy chief anymore. You can no longer be a part of my succession plan, so I don't need you. That was the last thing I was expecting that day. And I was dumbfounded. I was shocked, because I hadn't ever heard it. That was the complete opposite of what we'd been preaching up until that point.
Do you think that he was under stress?
Oh, I know he's under stress. Every officer's under stress.
So do you think that he didn't handle it well because of that?
I can't tell you why he didn't handle it well. I can tell you he didn't handle it well. I can tell you he didn't handle it well, but I can't tell you why. Maybe it was stress. That now he had a plan, and now his plan just fell apart on him. Now what? Right? And if I stay my 3.5 years, we would have left the agency about the same time. Does that mean an outside chief comes in? Because it's funny how chiefs believe that if an outside chief comes in, they failed their job, that they have failed the agency, because the agency doesn't promote from within. And that's a false narrative, but that's what a lot of chiefs believe.
Is that a good thing, to promote from within?
It is to a point. Agencies get stale, right? If you promote from within and promote from within, you don't see any new ideas. You don't see new technologies. You don't see anything new. You get the same ideas over and over and over. So it's okay, I think, a time or two, if you have the right people. But you have to also recognize that. But we also had a command staff that didn't have the education, so they didn't have the requirements to move up. Other than myself, The next guy in charge is a 14-year officer. So after me, there was a huge gap, a huge gap. And so I think that stressed him out.
So the meeting didn't go well. Was it a quiet meeting?
That one was. That was quiet.
That was a quiet meeting.
Yes, sir.
So no anger.
No, not at all. Confusion. I was absolutely confused.
Okay, so what happened at the end of the meeting?
At that one, I literally walked out and I was absolutely could not believe what I just heard. Could not believe it.
You talked to him on the 15th.
Mm-hmm.
He comes to you on the
17th.
17th in your office.
Yes, sir.
And what ensued then?
Well, he basically says, hey, I see you kind of had your head in the dirt. You've been down a little bit. And I said, yeah, I'm confused with our conversation. I'm absolutely confused by it. And when I started telling him my beliefs and my side of the story, he turned a switch. He flipped and he just started screaming at me. You're not right in the head. You can't do this job anymore, he said. And he's face to face with me, just screaming at me. And I said, you can't scream at me like this. You just can't do it.
And this is in an atmosphere where this can be heard outside of the walls.
Oh, absolutely.
These are not walls that are soundproof.
No, our building was built, I think, 95. There's no sound that's a stop. No. And we're confronting each other, and he's screaming, I'm the chief. I can talk to you however I want. You can't talk to me like this. And I'm like, man, I'm already struggling. Mentally, I'm struggling. Part of it tells you anger issues, right? Mm-hmm. And then you're going to come in me and confront me in my office, and then you're going to start screaming at me. Yeah, I screamed back. It was a screaming match between two men. That's what I thought.
So what happened when you guys stepped outside of the room where everybody looking at you, or did everybody just play like, we didn't hear that? What happened?
Yeah, I'm sure they were playing like, well, he went one way and he threw me out of the building, so I left the building.
So then you go and you talk to the city manager.
I asked to meet. Yep, I sent an email or a text message, one or the other, asking, I would like to speak to the city manager, because I did not appreciate the way that I was treated based on my mental wellness, because nobody else has been treated like that.
So, and what were you expecting to happen with the city manager?
Well, I thought that her and I would sit down and I would be able to air my grievances about the way I was treated.
But you go into your office and you see who?
I see the city manager and the chief.
And your thoughts was?
Oh boy, here we go. This is it. I've seen it before. I was a part of the system, so I've seen this game before. I knew exactly what was getting ready to happen.
So you knew the system at that point was gamed against you?
Yeah, I knew it 100%. Because I spoke with her for about 3 minutes, trying to tell her my complaints. I said, I'll talk about Chief of Joe, even though he's sitting here. I have no issues with that. And as soon as I'm done telling her, she said, okay, well, Chief has some things to tell you. And turned it all over to the chief.
So what happened after that? Now you go off, you had talked to the chief later on, you go to a convention, and he had given you some assurances that you probably would be back with the force. Would that be correct?
Well, that day after we met with the city manager, and he told me he was going to place me on administrative leave and he was going to start an investigation for my behavior towards him. And I looked at the city manager and I said, I came to you to file a complaint. How am I going to be investigated? He came to my office and confronted me, and he discriminated against me, hostile work environment, yet I'm the one being investigated. And she's like, well, his IA sergeant will do the investigation. And if they find out that the chief did anything wrong, I will then look at that. So I was like, okay, IRS is investigating the IRS. But as I go back down to my office, waiting on the paperwork for my administrative leave, he calls me up into his office. So I go up there, and he literally says, his first words, so I've been sitting in my bathroom on my knees praying for an hour, and God tells me you have Satan in your head. And I said, oh, okay, that's strange. And then we have a conversation. We talk about the confrontation, and it sounds like when we're talking, he has his ideas of what happened, I have mine. Talk about how it was an argument. Two men have an argument, which I'd heard him and the previous chief have arguments all the time. And he said, just go out on your conference. I'm going to talk to the city manager. We'll have this thing worked out. We get up, he hugs me, says, we're still brothers, says the word brothers, family, and I go my way. I go take a couple of days off, and then I head to San Antonio for my conference.
But then you started getting information that it's not always well in paradise.
No, he sent me away so he could have meetings and stuff where I wasn't in town to defend myself. He started a narrative about me while I was away.
And so you called him and verified this?
Yeah, I asked him to give me a call. I said, hey, been hearing some stuff. I looked at his calendar. I saw he'd met with the city attorney. He'd met with the city manager. So I knew what was going on.
You've seen this before.
Yep. And he told me straight over the phone, I'm not bringing you back as a deputy chief. He said, I'm not bringing you back as a deputy chief. And I was like, there has to be some sort of a due process. There's got to be. I haven't been disciplined. There's been no investigation. There was nothing. Nothing. I wasn't disciplined. I was never placed on administrative leave. He said, go to your conference, enjoy it, and come back, and everything will be good. but that's not what happened. And I'll tell you why that's not what happened, because he had a meeting with his command staff, and they told him that he would lose credibility if he brought me back. So his ego, he couldn't bring me back
So
because,
why would they think he would lose credibility?
because I'm probably the first person that confronted him. Like I said, he's berated people throughout my career. I've watched him in offices. I've seen it. I've seen it in public. I've seen him do it to citizens, to firefighters. I've seen him do it to city employees. I've seen him do it. And so I'm probably the first person that said, you're not going to do this to me.
So would the poor quality of leadership in the poll, would that correlate with what's going on here?
In my instance, it would, yes, sir.
In that kind of a situation, what kind of a stress does that put on other officers? They probably will never say anything.
Oh, he sent a huge message that day. He sent a message that if you speak out about mental wellness and you can't perform your job, you will absolutely either, you won't get promoted, you'll get fired, or you'll just get demoted to another position, just get transferred out.
So everything started spiraling out of control after that trip you made and what happened ensuing after that. I want to go and I'm going to ask you some questions and then just tell me what you think about this. You were separated before seeing a workman's comp doctor, true or false?
I'll say true, false. I saw a workman's comp doctor in late July for an evaluation. I went and I saw him. He talked about doing some procedures that I wasn't interested in, some chemical processes to treat mental wellness, and I wasn't excited about that. He was talking about ketamine and some other stuff that I'd heard some things about. And so I said, I got with my attorney. He said, you can change doctors one time. So I did in fact see a doctor, but I was never treated. He did an evaluation. We talked about treatment. He said, think about it for 2 weeks, because I told him right then, I said, yeah, I don't think I'm going to be in for this. He said, well, think about it. We can meet in 2 weeks, and if you're not, you get with your counsel and change doctors. That's what the doctor told me. So I did. So I changed doctors. And then my appointment to see that doctor and start treatment was October the 3rd.
So the doctor that you ended up going to ended up being hired by the city? Is this the doctor?
Yeah, it's just the same workers' comp doctor.
Okay.
Same thing.
So now she works for the city of Palm Bay?
Oh, no, that's the therapist I was seeing.
Oh, the therapist, okay.
That I was seeing my therapist on my own. So back in February, when I had the anxiety attack, and I literally thought I was going to die, and then they told me, no, this is stress related. Okay. That's when I said I got to go do something, and then I started seeking therapy on my own back in February.
A SWAT team was sent to deliver your remaining belongings from the office.
Yes, sir. On late May.
We're talking May of 2024.
2024.
Okay.
So I've been locked out of the building and isolated for about 30 days. On May 1st is when they shut off all my access to anything in the building. So it was late May. I still had property in my office, some property that quite frankly, I needed. And so I went to go get those, and I was told I'm not allowed in the building. So they told me I had to coordinate with human resources, which I did. And so I didn't know it. But yeah, I'm waiting there outside my house at 9 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden a caravan of 4 cars pull up. 5 people jump out.
So they're identifiable Palm Bay police cars?
They're all unmarked.
Unmarked?
Yeah,
Okay.
But you can see the way they roll in. The first one is a traffic truck, and then followed by 3 other cars. 5 officers jump out for 4 pieces of property.
And you identified these officers. You knew these officers.
Worked with every one
And
of them.
each one of them were on the SWAT team.
3 out of the 5 were.
On the SWAT team.
Yes, sir.
So what happened? They come to your house.
In a caravan. There were more officers than property, and there were as many cars as pieces of property.
And they get out the car.
They don't say a word. They completely ignore me. They completely ignore me.
So what do they do?
All they do is literally they get out. I think the lieutenant asked the wife, where do you want this stuff? And she points down. That was the only conversation, and they don't say a word to me.
These are the people you work with.
That I was still the deputy chief. Yeah, I was still the deputy chief at this time. I was their boss, and they don't even acknowledge me. Don't even acknowledge me.
You had neighbors who witnessed this.
Mm-hmm.
And their response was?
Yeah, they walked over and they said, hey, man, is everything okay? That was weird, because they were in tactical uniform. One was a traffic guy, so he was in a uniform. So it was quite obvious they were officers, and they recognized the fact that it was a weird situation. Nobody spoke. The number of people to bring 4 pieces of property, the number of cars that pulled up in front of my house, the fact it's all on body camera, because they body cam the whole thing, which it wasn't even a call for service, so you're not even required to body cam it. My house is public records exempt, so there's no reason for it. When I asked them to stop, I'd ask the officer, if you're body cam, please get off my property. I don't need my house and my family on public records. And the guy wouldn't even leave the property.
What ended up happening? So they give you the
They literally just
material.
they set it down, and they leave. Not a word was spoken.
They don't say anything.
Not a word. Pulled
And
body
these are people that you work with
pulled body
every
camera.
single day.
Yes, sir.
You were denied long-term disability.
So I applied for long-term disability. After 6 months, you can apply for long-term disability. So I put in all the paperwork. I got all the documentation, 3 different doctors, and then I submit it all. I get a denial letter back a month or 2 later. And one of the things in the denial letter, it says a statement supplied by your employer. So I was like, well, that's interesting. So I do a public records request and I get the statement from the employer. And literally probably 60% of the document was wrongfully filled out. They literally lied in the document. I think the first question was this job related? My mental wellness. They'd already stipulated in open court. We got depositions that it was work related. The state already stipulated, but they checked the box no. One of the questions was, is there an attempt to gradually bring this employee back to work? They said yes. The paperwork was submitted on September 13th. I was separated September the 2nd. So 2 weeks after I'm separated, they fill out documentation saying they have a plan to gradually bring me back to work. So of course my long-term got denied. They thought I was going back to work based on what the city. And there were a series of questions. They probably 6 or 7 questions that they lied on, just flat out lied.
Why would they do that? Just to deny you the disability?
It's the intimidation, retaliation, and the threats. That's what it all came down to.
And who would be behind that?
Well, the chief, for one. Human Resources allowed it because I provided them with a letter of all the allegations, and the city attorney. They were aware of it. So city staff, it was an orchestrated effort just to attack me and just do one more thing to deny me benefits.
So you had to sell your home in order to raise proceeds to live off of.
Yeah.
For how long?
Well, until I finally did. I did appeal my long term, so I do now currently get long term. But I didn't have any income from the city. I didn't have a retirement because of my age and because of the speed that they separated me. 4 months, a month before I'd even seen a workman's comp doctor, when they had allowed other employees a year and a half and 2 years, which I have on record. They've allowed officers to sit that were struggling with mental wellness to get paid for a year and a half. Me, it was 4 months. 4 months. I didn't have a chance to even put a game plan together because I'm still trying to get treatment. I'm still trying to get the treatment that I deserved. And so, yeah, it happened so suddenly. So we sold our house because we knew, one, that if I didn't have an income, we weren't going to be able to afford it. And if I didn't have an income, I wouldn't be able to move somewhere else. I wouldn't be able to jot the income down on a piece of paper.
So have you talked to the chief lately?
Not at all. He's texted me a couple times.
And what did he text you about?
I was in a crash, and he texted me and said, "I hope you're okay." And on Thanksgiving, he texted me a text basically saying, "Hopefully we can mend this and have some sort of relationship." And I didn't reply back to him because a week before that, he threatened to have me arrested at the dais. I'm like, are you kidding me, man? Seriously?
You started going to the city council,
Mm-hmm.
and you wanted to let it be known what was going on
Yes, sir.
at the city council.
Yes,
So
sir.
you went to public comment,
Yes,
and you
sir.
would speak during public comment.
Mhm.
First time, got a good response?
Yeah, get a great response. Councilman Johnson, this isn't right. We have a 20-year employee. This isn't right. What happened to him? I think Weinberg said, we need an outside investigation. We got to make this right. Yeah, great response until the next day.
Then what happened?
I sent them an email and said, hey, I'll meet with you individually one-on-one. I'll tell you my story one-on-one because obviously they can't violate sunshine laws. But I sent them an email. I said, I will tell you my story, one person to one person. And then I get an email back from the mayor. Sorry, we've been advised by our attorney that we can't talk to you. You should go get an attorney. Another one. Yep, sorry, we can't really talk to you. Our city attorneys told us not to. So you lawyered up. They lawyered up on September the 6th.
So then you kept going back though to the city council meetings.
I did.
And how did that prove fruitful?
Not at all. The mayor started to berate me at the podium. One time he cut me off over and over. I think it was November 25th. He's interrupting me. I'm tired of you coming to the podium. I'm tired of you disrespecting our law enforcement. I'm like, I'm not disrespecting law enforcement. I'm actually supporting our law enforcement. At the dais, they were trying to discredit me, basically saying I was a disgruntled employee. City attorney lied and said that I had gotten treatment prior to being separated, which is a lie. I know because I have the medical records. And then, like I said, the chief even came to the podium one time and suggested he was going to get with the state attorney because of some words I said at the podium. So they did all the intimidation factors that I expected.
Where's it at now? So you're in the midst of a suit.
I have filed an EEOC complaint.
An EEOC complaint.
Yes, sir.
With the city.
Yes, sir.
And where's the process at now?
It's still in the initial processes right now. So
So how long do you think this will go on?
I've been told it can go up to a year.
Do you think you have a rock solid case?
If I don't have a rock solid case, then nobody should ever file an EEOC complaint. Because I provided a statement against the chief on May the 9th. And I said in that statement, I want to keep this in-house. You guys handle this. I literally just want my treatment. In September, I didn't get a response all the way up until September. That's the only reason I took it public. I took it public thinking I could get some motivation. But you got to remember, on August the 15th, I met with the city attorney. They asked me, can you provide a statement against Chief Agello in regards to your allegations? So I sat down with them for 2 hours, and I provided a statement on August the 15th, 2024. I was separated 7 days later. 7 days later. Thank you for your time. I provided a statement, I was retaliated against, and I was separated.
Have you heard from other officers?
I do hear from officers.
What did they say to you?
They're rooting for me because they understand it. But understand it is a divided department. When you demand loyalty, that scares officers. So they're not going to speak out to me. So I'll tell you, a majority of the department does not speak to me. Haven't spoken to me, and I get that. I understand that. But I do have officers that reach out to me. I know they watch the meetings, they watch the interviews because they won't watch them when they're live because they don't want to see their name on the. They don't want it to be like Lance Fisher is watching, but they do watch them afterwards, and I get responses from those officers. And there are officers that are rooting for me because they know they've been with that agency long enough and they know what it's all about. And they're not in that little group. And if you're not in that little group, you're not getting promoted. You're going to get overlooked when it comes to special unit positions. You're just going to continue to get overlooked, and you're the ones that are going to be disciplined.
What's the implication of this? If this goes bad for you, what's the implication of that to other officers, not just on Palm Bay? What does this say about officers in other places?
I think my camera said it. And until it happens to you, it's not that big of a deal. And that's correct. But I've found out, because I've had people reach out to me, that my story is not unique. This happens in a lot of agencies. And the more I tell my story, the more the people reach out to me. And I think what it solidifies is that there is almost a cult culture within law enforcement. If you speak out about law enforcement, and my wife and I had this conversation before I started this, I said, you understand what's going to happen to me. They're going to outcast me, and they're going to talk about me, and they're going to try to discredit me. They're going to do everything. And they've done everything. The only thing they haven't done is call me a liar. They have not called me a liar. So what they've told not only officers, but they've told every Palm Bay employee, you better not speak out, because the mayor himself at the dais has sat there and berated me. So that tells every other employee, you better just either go away quietly and don't say anything at all. It's unfortunate.
So do you think that the outcome, if you win, it probably will be an encouragement to other officers?
I don't think so. I honestly don't think so. I think they've already made their statement.
Okay.
I think they've already made their statement. Because the reason is the process is lengthy, and I'm a deputy chief, and I'm struggling. I'm struggling to get this process rolling. So I can't imagine. So if you're a citizen and you file complaints against the police department in any jurisdiction, I can only imagine what you're going to have to go through, because I'm a deputy chief and I knew the system. I was in these meetings, and I have a lot of information that a normal citizen wouldn't have. So I think they've made their statement. They've made their statement until they do a regime change. And I'm talking city attorney. They already changed over to city manager. Until they do a leadership change in that police department. And I'm not talking about a chief, a leadership change. Because if you take out the chief, you have a deputy chief and commanders that are just Chief Agello minions. That's what they are.
All right. Well, this is really interesting, Lance, and we're going to have you back, and we will have you back on Brevard News. You've been listening to former Deputy Chief of the Palm Bay Police Department, Lance Fisher, and it's been nice to have him with us. If you have questions, direct message us on our Facebook page, and we'll get them to Lance. And we hope that you enjoyed this segment of Brevard Meets. We hope that you join us again next time.